So they're doing a talk about gay marriage here, um, and we've got the flamingly gay MP from Ireland here, along with the host of the show. Her name is Oksana, and she's I don't want to pretend that I know where she stands individually on the issue, but she's trying to reflect a perception of popular opinion in Russia. I'm going to change my batteries now before we get into this. See, this was recorded in 2014, which was about the time when all the kerfuffle about Russia and gay people was coming up. And she's trying to take the kind of, Kremlin line of that, she's not opposed to gay people herself. That there's no state repression of gay people in Russia, but there's a lot of social opposition to homosexuality in Russia, meaning that it's. And my understanding is that this is completely accurate, right? The Western portrayal of Russia as an anti-gay state is basically just propaganda. Um, you know, and we saw a lot of propaganda come out, around the Ukraine issue. Before that, going back to Georgia, in fact, one could probably take the argument that the propaganda never really went away, right? But I suppose with the, there's a real impetus for it, right? It didn't come out of nothing, and the reality of it is that it's the Russian people, right? So a lot up in Canada, we say this all the time, right? We say, we don't hate Americans. Americans are good people. They have the same value systems that we do, more or less. But the American government is just fucked, right? And the people in the government are screwed up and everything else, right? With Russia, it seems to be the other way around. And this is just one of many sorts of issues that fall into this category. I think the best way to talk about Russia is that the Russian government is not that different than any other Western government. In the way that it's composed, in the way that it conducts itself, etc. But the Russian people are just off the wall conservative. They've gone down a rabbit hole of orthodox extremism, and have become sort of extreme religious fundamentalists. It's not just the gay people thing either. Something that's happened in Russia over the last couple of years is that they've tried to ban I think it was a state governor. Don't quote me on that for sure. It might have been a city council, but I'm pretty sure it was a state governor that tried. Well, in what were they? Oblasts in Russia. They're like semi-autonomous regions. Russia is actually quite similar to the United States in the idea that it's a confederation, except that instead of it being a bunch of states that really don't have cultural bases, the states in Russia are like, a lot of them have different language groups, different ethnicity groups, and it's very much a multicultural society in that sense, right? But one of the things that I believe it was one of the governors in one of the oblasts tried to do was ban the Bhagavad Gita, which is a important text in the Hindu religion. And it was just out of the same kind of Christian supremacism, right? And if you're looking closely and you're paying attention to what's happening behind the scenes in Russia, it's been a continuing narrative for about 20 years now that the Orthodox Church has slowly been taking over control of society. Again, Putin is often portrayed in the West as this autocrat. He's not even like in the top tier of the leadership in Russia, right? What's happened over the last couple of years is that the military has become the dominant institution in society. But before that, it was the church, and so you had the political leadership a few rungs down the ladder, And then you've got the oligarchs as well, behind the scenes, right? The real story in Russia is about how little power the political executive actually really has when compared to these organizations that exist outside of the government, right? And as an extreme leftist with very negative views about religion, I look out. To me, Russia is a huge lesson that when you crack down on a religion like that, this is what happens: is it comes back that much stronger. And it's created a society that has lost its mind in the backwardsness of religious adherence. You'll hear everything under the sun. Russia's return to authoritarianism. Russia's returns to to communism, or you'll hear all kinds of nonsense. The actual narrative that's rooted in fact and truth is that Russia has become a very right-wing Christian society, not dissimilar from the United States, actually. Except that much worse, right? Russia is like Texas on steroids. That's Russia. If you took the white population in Louisiana and you mass overbred it and you sprinkled it across Eurasia, that's Russia. Or at least that's what Russia is now. Okay? Massive amounts of it's mass poverty. Okay? Like, the poverty levels are off the wall. It's xenophobic, it's racist, and it's starkly Christian. It's like the American Deep South. And it's the people, right? Well, look what they did in North Carolina, right? Look at the law they passed there, preventing trans people from entering a bathroom. If you talk to, Northerners anyways, and a lot of Southerners, they come across as, good people. They respect people's rights and everything, but it's, in Russia, it's more the people, right? So she's taking this kind of traditional Russian line, right, which is the same line that you heard all the Russian. This is the Russian network. She is a Russian spokesperson, right? It's very obvious that's a part of her job. Is to present things in the light of what the state would want people to hear, because that is the mandate for RT, right? Is to sorry, my still not wearing clothes, and it's actually I got the heat set to 29 now, so it's nice and hot in here. It's a leather couch. I don't know if it's real leather or not. I inherited this couch. My skin gets stuck to it from time to time. Anyways, yeah. So she speaks for the Russian state. That's the mandate of RT, is to present the Russian opinion across the world. So, its employees will speak in that capacity, and it's also its value, right? Where else do you get to hear what the Russian government has to say without the filter of Western propaganda? There's nowhere else, right? You gotta go to the source, right? So she's presenting it from that perspective, which is, the government is not doing anything to crack down on the gay people or to oppress them or anything, but the Russian people are under the influence of a rise in right-wing extremism, and of course not all of them, but a substantial minority of them, anyways, are really taking a hard reaction against this, and trying to push it out of society, right? And what she's doing is she's trying to, kind of mediate between that. She's saying that she doesn't have any, you know, she represents the government, she represents the state, she doesn't have any negative feelings, but she's trying to explain the perspective of this significant Russian minority, right? I'm using terms like heteronormativity, which the gay guy apparently never heard before. Quite strange to me. Anyway, so they're talking about gay marriage. The gay activist is predictably taking the position that marriage is marriage, and she's kind of saying, I want to, gay people should have rights and all these kinds of things, but marriage is a special thing, for population replacement and everything else, right? And they actually had a long discussion about that, and the MP was talking about overpopulation on a global level, apparently completely unaware that Russia has had extreme declines in birth population since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that Russia actually does have issues with population replacement that some state interference is probably warranted with it. The state should be in Russia, anyways. Perhaps not in Zaire, but in Russia, there really ought to be serious state policies too, and try to increase fertility levels. Going after the mass poverty might help. Might be a little bit more effective than going after gay people. Maybe if people weren't so poor, they'd be more likely to have kids. Right? Gay marriage. So they're talking about, they're presenting these two kinds of perspectives, and oftentimes this is the extent of the debate around gay marriage, right? You have on one side people that think that anyone can get married, and on the other side you've got people that want to protect the traditional concept of marriage. There is another perspective, kind of a left-wing perspective. The left, the return of the left, which has been completely missing in the entire debate over gay marriage, which has been going on for 20 years now. The left has essentially been silent on gay marriage for all of the 20 years. The only voice that's really left wing that I've heard about come from gay marriage is coming from libertarians, which is and it's really not really right either, right? What is the libertarian position on gay marriage? Well, a lot of them will say no. I mean, there's going to be a spectrum. Some of them will be like, whatever. But broadly speaking, most libertarians do not support gay marriage. Or at least they don't support it in the terms that it exists in, because they think that the state doesn't belong in the marriage industry. They think that marriage should be a personal contract that should be signed between consenting adults, and that the state should not interfere with that. So I mean, you'll have people that call themselves libertarians that'll take other positions, but you got to kind of scratch your head, right? If you're serious about this whole libertarian thing, it's hard to see how you could argue for the validity of government interference in marriage. I mean, that's one of the most, fundamentally personal things that you could really even possibly even think of, right? But for them, it's all about contracts, right? And the regulation of contracts by a state rather than the regulation of contracts over a market. So they might argue that, can, two people of the same sex sign a consensual contract about the division of property? Sure, right? There's no, the state has no more right to interfere, between two men than they do between a male and a female. But the basic position is to get the state out of marriage and just talk about, contracts of property, which I think in a real sense is actually going back a long ways, right? If you go back to the 15th, 16th centuries, a marriage was about people putting together, their properties. People would marry out of financial alliances. It really had nothing to do with this, kind of concept of love, which came a lot later. I'm not going to put a date on it because I don't really know. I'm thinking Wollstonecraft. So probably early 1800s, anyways. It's relatively recent, right? And so, what is gay marriage then when you put it in that kind of, like, on the one hand, you're taking this kind of like post-propertarian concept of love, and you're trying to attach it to this. Did I say post-propertarian concept of love? That's a loaded term. I don't think we've been anywhere near post-propertarian in any point in the human timeline up to this point. Anyways, what I meant to say was like on the other side of like the marriage as a propertarian contract, right? So you're taking kind of a late concept of marriage and trying to attach it to the historical underpinnings of marriage, which are now largely forgotten. People get married, they get divorced, they sign prenups. It's not this whole idea of marriage about the whole point of marriage has kind of been lost, right? So, but that's the only time you ever really hear this discussion is coming from libertarians. There's a whole other approach to marriage that is actually very old. I think that the earliest references that I know of to the abolishment of marriage are actually from Plato. And the idea is the abolition of contracts between people to govern the distribution of property. And so somebody asks a leftist, and in fact, it's actually one of those kind of acid tests that really determines whether you're, a real leftist or you're one of these, moderate conservative, liberal kind of types, right? Conservative liberals. See, and that's the other thing that I say conservatives, liberals are all the same thing. If that makes no sense to you, you're not a leftist. If you are a leftist, that makes perfect sense to you, because conservatives and liberals are the same thing. Very, very mild variations on the same on the term. They're the debates between conservatives and liberals are largely trivial when you compare them to the debates between, liberals and socialists, right? liberals and conservatives are all about property, they're all about markets, all these kinds of things, right? In the family as a unit to to uphold property, to uphold patriarchal norms, and all these kinds of things. Liberals and conservatives don't really have any serious disagreement on that. They might, have minor agreements on the realms of, inclusion, and even so, there'll be special cases, right? Conservatives will say no gay marriage except for them, except for the one gay guy over there who, we really like, his opinion on economics, and we hang out with him all the time, right? But all the other gay people, it's, it's inconsistent, and it's largely trivial, right? But one of the real tests to determine this, whether you are in this kind of muddled liberal conservative mess, or whether you actually are on the left, is this perception about gay marriage. Because if somebody asks you about gay marriage and you're all for it and you're fighting for it and you're campaigning for it, then you're not a leftist. You can't be. Because you're upholding a system of property. You're upholding a system designed to control and distribute and restrict property. And in fact, whether you want to talk about it, as gay marriage or not, it is actually still a system that's designed to oppress women, even if you're talking about women getting married. And so a left position is actually going to be in favor. Not only would a real leftist not support gay marriage, but a real leftist would oppose marriage altogether. They would oppose the idea of a nuclear family. They would oppose the idea of monogamy, or at least enforced monogamy, right? If people choose to be monogamous, that's, it's up to them. But the idea of placing a monogamous pairing under the dictates of a structure of law is completely inconsistent with any concept on the left. There's no way to talk your way out of it. So when people ask me about this, don't you support gay marriage? Aren't you into the... Considering that we have a status quo, and the status quo is not likely to change anytime soon, what I'll say is that, I'm not going to go out of my way to stop gay marriage, right? If we can have heterosexual marriage, well then why can't we have homosexual marriage? Well, sure. I don't disagree with you if we have heterosexual marriage. It's just I don't think we should have heterosexual marriage. And because I don't think we should have heterosexual marriage, I don't think we should have homosexual marriage either. And that's the left. We'll have another moment, another surreal moment of clarity at some point in the future, I'm sure.